Now you take wire photographers. They're all using us now. Were you sticking out Carter Page?
I was.
Reactions always good.
That's true in the sport, but something like a third of all,
That's what? I'm guessing yes. Why? So you can stand behind everybody and look at the ceiling. Taking a knee for America. You're a serious man. Rip the dial off. That's hardcore, man.
It's just what you're used to.
900 meter.
You're like, well, they're like,
Maybe. Probably next year with an IS version. Updated optics and IS. That'd be good. That'd be a good company to make a jump.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. As you know, today House Republicans unveiled a bill that raises taxes on millions of middle-class families and borrows trillions from the future just to give massive new tax breaks to the wealthy and especially to their friends, corporate America. The American people deserve real bipartisan tax reform that puts the middle class first, growth, creating good-paying jobs, and lowers the deficit. This Republican plan doesn't do any of that. In fact, it is a giveaway to corporations and the wealthiest. They brag about saying they have a sample family that if you make this much money, you get this much tax break. What's really important to know about what they're doing is what they give you with one hand, they take away with the other. They're raising taxes, again, on millions of middle-class families, hoping that the American people won't figure it out because they're going to race this through. We know that there's some members on the floor of the House today who are on the Ways and Means Committee who have never even seen this bill. So if you're a middle-class family, how do you judge this? If you own a home or want to one day, you lose. If you have a sick child or a family member with long-term medical care needs, they take away the medical deduction, you lose. If you have student loans or want to have student loans or use the credit for lifetime learning, there's a credit for lifetime learning, you lose. If your corporation wants to pay for learning for employees, that deduction is gone. You lose. If your family lives in a state, any state, and don't want your income taxed twice, you lose. And if you plan to living past 65 and need Medicare, you lose. Hidden in the pages of the Ryan McConnell bill are devastating plans to raise taxes on working families by dismantling state and local tax deductions, encouraging corporations to ship jobs overseas. This is very important. Shipping jobs overseas costs you less than creating jobs in America. Offshoring jobs at the expense of the American worker. $1.5 trillion in tax breaks for corporate America. This all goes together. It's a package for corporate America. $1.5 trillion in tax breaks for corporate America. The same exact amount that they cut from Medicare, $500 billion, Medicaid, $1 trillion. $1.5 trillion from Medicare and Medicaid, $1.5 trillion gift to corporate America, and the additional gift of lowering the cost of shipping, making it cheaper for them to ship jobs overseas than to create jobs in the United States. And even after ransacking all the middle-class benefits, Republicans are still adding trillions to the deficit, scheming to use the debt they pile up today to obliterate Medicare and Medicaid tomorrow. This is a shell game, a Ponzi scheme that corporate America will perpetrate on the American people. The Republican bill, written in secret, designed to be raced forward before it's truly understood, ransacks vital benefits for the middle class. But if you're the wealthiest, 1%, Republicans will give you the sun, the moon, and the stars, all of that at the expense of the great middle class, which is the backbone of our democracy. I'm pleased now to welcome back to the House side and yield to the distinguished Democratic leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer.
Thank you, Nancy. When I was in the House and Ron was in the House, we didn't have such a fancy room here. We had that little place up on the third floor, which I inhabited regularly.
Camera shy as he is.
Don't need any add-ons here, Nance. Okay. Well, we're still pouring through the fine print of the House Republican tax plan. One thing is crystal clear. This plan is a tax burden that ought to be on the backs of the wealthy and the biggest corporations, but instead it drops it squarely on the backs of the middle class. You're a big corporation, you're a wealthy individual, you do great. You're a middle class person, you suffer. Republicans are trying to argue that the middle class gets a tax break, but what they won't tell you is that many, many, many middle class families will see their taxes go up under this plan. Let me give you two examples. A family in New York or Illinois or Virginia They have a household income of about $100,000. In those states, that's not very much because teacher, policeman, living together, husband and wife, make over that. Now, if you take the typical amount of each of those deductions, their taxable income would fall to $44,397, meaning this family pays $5,727 more in taxes, while the wealthy get a huge break. People like that are the backbone of the middle class. They're all over the suburbs of New York and California, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Colorado, many of them in the districts of our Republican friends. They're going to pay a whole lot more. Now, let's take another family, a poorer family, making $40,000 a year. Now, this family could get an increase of $810 because the child tax credit doesn't help those families. Instead, the bottom rate goes up and they pay more. So throughout the middle class, millions upon millions of hardworking citizens are paying more. I wonder if you can find someone whose income is over $1 million a year who's going to pay less. Who's going to pay more? They won't. Middle class pays more, wealthy pay less. And people in different individual circumstances get clobbered. If you pay student loans, if you have a mortgage, you have medical expenses, your taxes could very well go up because they eliminate the deductions for the middle class and increase the ability of the wealthy to pay less. So family after family after family gets hurt. We'll give you the examples of the families making $100,000, the family making $40,000, and how much more they pay. And so, this bill is everything America doesn't want. America doesn't want the wealthy to pay less taxes. They know that big corporations are swimming in money and don't need any more, and they won't produce any jobs. They want middle-class tax relief. And this bill takes away so much of middle-class tax relief that millions of middle-class families will be in pain from this bill. And now, we see what our Republican colleagues are doing. The bill comes out Thursday. They want to start marking it up Monday. A bill of enormous complexity that affects millions of people in so many different ways. That's a disgrace. To rush a bill like this through without a hearing, without scores, without experts looking at it, all the businesses want to look at it. Everybody wants to look at it. They're trying to rush it through. Why? They're ashamed of this bill. The Republicans know the more this bill is exposed out there, the less people like it. In short, the bill's like a fish. If it stays out in the sunlight too long, it stinks. They don't want that to happen. Our Republican friends want to avoid the spotlight. The last time our tax code was reformed, it was so different. Both parties worked together at length. Proposals were vetted. I was there. I worked on that bill, along with Chairman Gephardt, Senator Bradley. There were countless hours of hearings. Problems that existed in the initial draft were changed and perfected and modified, so at the end it was a bill that everyone could be proud of. Republicans are not proud of this bill. If they were, they'd march the bill down the streets of America with a big brass band and say, "Hey, everybody, look at our bill." Instead, they're hiding the bill. And that's because they're not doing tax reform. They're doing tax giveaways to the wealthy and the powerful and telling the middle class, take a hike. You're on your own, baby. We will fight this bill tooth and nail. I believe we will prevail, even in the shortened time that they try to rush it through. Tax legislation is extremely complex, and you cannot have a successful bill if you rush it through in the dark of night. Richie.
Thanks, Charlie. This is a missed opportunity. And I say missed opportunity because I want to highlight what happened back in '86 specifically. There were 30 hearings in the full Ways and Means Committee. There were 12 hearings in the Ways and Means subcommittees. More than 450 witnesses testified, and the markup took 26 days. A reminder, we have not even seen the chairman's mark. We're likely to see that maybe tomorrow. As of the moment, we have not seen the distribution tables. We've not had a chance to go through anything other than what they've presented by a press conference. But we do know the following, that they're going to say on one hand that they're giving $1,150 to the average family and then simultaneously taking it away by capping deductions that they have for home ownership. And how about the fact that there's $1 trillion worth of student debt in America and they're taking away the ability of students to deduct that interest? When you consider what they're doing on the charitable front, this is going to discourage charitable giving. These were guarantees that they made to people that this wouldn't happen. Urban issues, getting rid of new markets tax credits, getting rid of the historic tax credit, and then talking about stimulus. Stimulus in old cities today is from new markets tax credits. That's how it's done. So when you look at what we've had this exercise in, trying to decipher simplicity, one thing we can be all assured of today, this is anything but simplification of the tax code. You're going to have a chance to pour through these details now during the course of the next few hours, but we're all anxious to see those distribution tables so that we can finally figure out who gets what. But it's very clear at this moment that their advertised effort on behalf of the middle class is simply not true.
Rich, thank you, and good to be with the Speaker and my leader, Senator Schumer. I think it's important to recognize what this bill is really all about. It's designed to offer what appear to be enough crumbs for some middle-class folks in order to distract from the multi-trillion-dollar giveaways to the big corporations that ship jobs overseas and the mega wealthy. And let me give you an example, and Senator Schumer and I have been looking at these examples all through the morning. Say you have a family who makes a little bit over $50,000. On a good day, maybe, just maybe, that family might get an itty-bitty sliver. But if they have to send a kid to school, or they have to pay medical expenses, which they could no longer write off, this bill leaves that family behind. And that is going to be the message we are going to be getting out over the next couple of days. My colleagues said the overwhelming winners in this bill are the people who have the power, the people who can hire all the technicians and all the experts who are already thriving in an economy that leaves so many working class people behind. Now, we know that there is a lot still to be evaluated. I think it takes your breath away to believe that you can, on Monday, talk about a bill and actually begin considering it formally that would remake the American economy with such flimsy amounts of information that are available. And what I'm going to be stressing, I'm on my way, and I appreciate both the leaders recognizing that we West Coasters have flights and the like. I'm having town meetings, 4 of them over the weekend. The first thing I'm going to talk about is if you want to do a tax bill right, you don't start with a double standard. The corporate tax breaks in the Republican plan are permanent, written in ink, set in stone, locked in place, key thrown away. But look at the bill. So far, a lot of families are going to be settling for temporary tax cuts. There's a double standard on double taxation. The corporations are still going to get to deduct their state and local taxes, but individuals and families won't. A recent college grad who didn't come from much and took on tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt loses their deduction for student loan interest payments, but guess what? the multinationals who ship jobs overseas still get to deduct their interest payments. Now, what could be more clear evidence of the kind of double standard that my colleagues and I are talking about? And the last point I want to mention is deeply personal, and I have talked about this with my friends over the years. I was director of the Gray Panthers for many years, back when I had a full head of hair and rugged good looks, and boy, this is really anti-senior as it relates to the change in the medical deduction. A senior who's got an expensive health condition, for example, a rare cancer or a dental problem that requires frequent treatment, loses under this proposal the ability to deduct those medical expenses. But corporate tax breaks for expenses will get even bigger. Let me tell you something. President Trump didn't tell seniors in America during the campaign that they were going to lose the opportunity to be able to afford health care. So along with my colleagues who've said it very well, this is going to be a full court press, because what they want to do is get this bill out before Americans have had the chance to put a dent in their holiday shopping. That's because this bill can't stand the light of day. We're going to make sure that we take to the American people what this bill's really all about.
I just want to make one correction before we do questions. I left out the $100,000 family, okay? A lot of states like mine, married teacher and police officer, make considerably more than that. They deduct their state and local taxes, their mortgage interest, student loans, and medical expenses. Take a typical amount for each of those deductions. Their taxable income falls to $44,397. They would owe $5,727 in taxes, but here's the part I left out. They get $3,000 in child tax credits, so their tax burden goes to $2,727, which is $993 more. So people making $100,000, people making $40,000, and lots of people in between pay a lot more in taxes, while the big fat cats do just grand.
I just wanted to put three facts together here about corporate America, because you said the president didn't say this or that during the campaign to seniors. He didn't say to America's workers that we're going to give $1.5 trillion tax break to corporate America, the same amount we're going to take out of Medicare and Medicaid, give $1.5 trillion tax break to corporate America, make it cheaper for them to send jobs overseas than to create jobs here. And then, as the senator said, the ranking member on the Finance Committee, vice chairman, whatever they call it there, said, while individuals in the states cannot deduct their state and local taxes, corporations can, and even corporations who make that money overseas. It's a total rip. And when he said they found some crumbs, it just reminds you of a big banquet for all the rich and powerful, sharing all the money that they're taking from the middle class while they throw some crumbs. It's a flim-flam. It has to be rejected. You have to help us get the word out. Any questions? No questions?
On the AMT, too, I think, because many of you have followed the work we've done on that, myself having earned a PhD in it, I think. On AMT, we took care of the middle class on AMT in the famous New Year's Eve get-together we had almost a couple of years ago. The middle class does not pay AMT anymore. This is now what they're doing. It's limited to the highest income Americans. It's about 4.5 million families. That's all that are going to pay AMT.
Questions?
Because of reconciliation, Republicans can move and pass this without you guys. So what is your role here? We know you're against this, but what's your role going forward?
Same role we had in health care. Let the American people know about the bill. They won't like it, and as a result, they won't get enough votes to pass it. This bill is so against what the average American wants, and they're beginning to see it. Most of the polling data shows that when that people are now against the Trump tax plan. Poll I saw, it was 58% said they thought it was for the wealthy, 18% against it, another one 46 against, 28 for. And these folks are going to go home, and many of them are in vulnerable districts, and their constituents are going to know that they're hurting average voters to help the very wealthy. No one buys that except the 1,000 people in the right-wing contribution and the people in the think tanks and law schools they pay. So once the public learns about this plan, now that it's public, they're not going to like it. There's going to be huge pressure on Republicans not to vote for it. Yes.
Democratic unity was extremely powerful on Obamacare bill. The idea that you guys didn't lose any members. This, by some accounts, is going to be a harder lift on that. How confident are you?
Well, we have in the Senate, 45 of our 48 signed a letter that asked just for 3 things. 1, no tax breaks for the top 1%. They get a big one through the pass-throughs, huge, and a state tax. 2nd, budget neutrality. Don't increase the deficit. This tax bill blows a huge hole through the deficit. And 3rd, work with us, don't use reconciliation. Even the 3 who didn't vote for it, listen to what they've said, didn't sign our letter. Even the 3 who didn't sign our letter agree with those 3 principles. This bill's very far away from them. Just listen to what they're saying about it.
Leader, can I add a word on that? Go ahead. Alana, I went with the 5 Democrats to the White House about 10 days or so ago. They were the 5 Democrats up for election in 2018 in the states that Donald Trump won. And all of them very specifically backed up the principles that Leader Schumer just mentioned. First thing out of their mouth, we've got to get this to the middle class. 2nd, can't get it to the wealthy. In fact, when the finance Democrats brought it up, the president said, oh, we don't want it to go to people like myself, and that it wouldn't clobber Social Security and Medicare. So the points that he has stressed were the very ones that the finance Democrats in states that the president won in 2018 emphasized when they were with the president.
And you got an interesting dynamic here. In the House, you have a lot of Republicans from suburban, fairly well-off districts who are going to get clobbered by this bill. So to get it to pass, which I don't know if they'll be able to do it, they got to make the deficit worse by getting rid of the few pay-fors, which are mainly on the backs of the middle class. In the Senate, you have a good number of senators, they've already expressed, who are deficit hawks, Republican. And they don't want to vote for something that has a, multi-trillion-dollar hole in the deficit. And so what helps them pass it in the House hurts them to pass it in the Senate and vice versa. They're in a very difficult position.
And I might add that in addition to our internal unity, we had unity with all those outside who are paying attention to what was happening on health care. And they see this tax, that was a tax bill disguised as a health care bill, what they did before, and that was defeated. Now they have a tax bill that seriously undermines the good health of the American people. So many of those same people will be making calls into the Republican districts about the medical tax deduction, about what it does to Medicare and Medicaid, about what it does to charitable giving, because many of these charitable organizations meet the needs of the neediest, and they are very activated in the Republican district. So our unity internally is good for our own maneuvering, but the outside mobilization is unified against this as well. And while the tax bill, the health bill was life and death, this is really everything on the line.
Tom.
Yes, Pelosi, sorry. Why are the California Republicans supporting this bill when they're in the same spot that New York and New Jersey Republicans are?
Well, that's a very good question. Earlier today, some of you may have been here, we had our California delegation, Democrats, lined up, and 14 of them read what it meant in different districts, how many people were affected, what the average deduction would be. In one district, it's over, Royce, it's over 200,000 people, around 18,000 in the deduction as he voted for it. And it will be interesting to see. Our governor has sent letters to them. We've had lots of press going on about it, so that they are hoping that their constituents don't know what's happening here. And that's what the point that the leader made earlier. They're just hoping they could masquerade in this week of Halloween, masquerade as fiscal conservatives and the rest. But I said I indict them for what they are doing to their own constituents, costing them money. Why? Why? Why is always the question. Why? So they can give tax cuts to the high end and to corporate America, enabling them to ship jobs overseas at an advantage, take their deduction, even for the money they make overseas, while depriving their own constituents of that. So they will be hearing from their constituents on it. Let's hope that they were just enabling the process to go forward. Let's hope that that's the case. Or maybe ideologically, they're just trickle-down guys, and their constituents will have to make a judgment about that.
But the Republican leadership, House and Senate, told them, don't stop it now. Let it go forward and let's see what happens. Well,
It's likely to get worse.
and it's going to get worse. And the likelihood, they may be living in the old world. Back in 2000, if you gave huge tax breaks to the wealthy and crumbs to the middle class would say, okay, I'm getting something. The world's different. With income distribution the way it is, with the populism and anger that propelled Donald Trump to the presidency, you can't get away with that anymore. You can't say, I'll give the middle class a crumb or two, give almost all the tax breaks to the rich and powerful, and have people go along with it.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask the two senators, what do you think the Finance Committee will do on this bill? How will it be different from what the House is?
As of now, what we have been led to believe is after the legislation gets out of the House Ways and Means Committee, Chairman Hatch intends to lay down his own mark. Now, he has been part of this gang of six, so we don't know what he'll do. My hope is that he will see over the next few days how many of his constituents in Utah get hurt, how damaging this is to the middle class, how harmful it is to students. He'll say, I don't want to go that route. Now, I can't tell you what the odds are, but one of the reasons that we are going to be working around the clock right now, particularly with this unheard of concept where Rich Neal has got to have a markup of a bill on Monday with virtually no information. Bill Bradley called up the other day, he's a friend of all of ours, and was intimately involved in the 86 bill. And I explained to him what was going on. He was just incredulous because in the Finance Committee, they took days and days to try to find common ground. They were on the floor of the Senate for weeks in an effort to try to come together. And the point I just made to Chairman Hatch is I said, if you decide you won't accept our principles, focused on the middle class, not on the people at the top, not wrecking Social Security and Medicare, you aren't going to get a bipartisan bill. And if you just pass this on a partisan off-ramp only, you might be able to get a sugar high, but you're going to see that you and your party have a lot of problems in the days ahead. So what we're trying to do is generate as much visibility and focus on what this bill actually does, so that after Rich Neal and the Ways and Means Committee do everything they can, we can build on it and hopefully in the Senate produce something different.
But if I just...
The House Republicans are proposing to eliminate private activity bonds, which were
Right.
used for airports, are used for a lot of other things. And Congressman Neal, you're part of a group of 20 Democrats opposed the bill earlier this week for disaster recovery bonds. Liberty bonds were used.
You should know I also lifted the cap on private activity bonds when we were in the majority. You've described it. It's stimulus. It's like Build America bonds, exactly. It's stimulus. And anybody who's been to an airport in America today, anything that's been expanded recently or over the last 4 or 5 years, it was either Build America bonds or lifting the cap on the private activity bonds. It did it. So, even now, by the way, when you go through what they've done with municipal finance here, they shave back the exemption on municipal bonds. And they're not going to be quite as attractive as they once were. So I can't wait till mayors and others begin to take a look at this information.
If I just may say on this whole score, because the leader talked about the deficit, and that's been a big problem. Many Americans just want to know what it means to them in their lives, and it's bad news. But in terms of our country and our responsibility, the increase in the national debt is huge in the 10-year period. But in the out years, it hemorrhages money. It's a hemorrhaging bill. And those of you who care about deficit, and we supposedly have deficit hawks in the Congress, although, as I've said before, they're becoming an endangered species. If they care, they have to know that we always have to do your thing. When we did health care and all the others, it was the first 10 years, the second 10 years. The second 10 years are very detrimental to our country. There's almost no turning back from what they want to do. We have to stop them now.
One other point
Excuse me,
related
I'm
to your
sorry.
question. Oh, did
Actually,
you
I'm
want
going to excuse myself because we have votes.
Okay.
Two former members of the House will take over.
Both class of 1980, although you're a little quicker than me. Another issue about jobs. Not only do private activity bonds, getting rid of them, hurt jobs, thousands and hundreds of thousands of construction jobs, but housing is hurt badly by this. That's why the realtors are against it. That's why the home builders are against it. And I just saw a Reuters story that said the home index, the index of companies that have to do with homes, furnishings, and everything else, it's 1/6 of our economy, went way down after this bill came out. So they're talking about jobs, but small business is unhappy with it, and FIB is not for this bill right now. The realtors and the homeowners showing the housing industry is not for it. You have quasi-municipal finance for roads or bridges or stadiums or things like that. They're not for it. And the job gain that they think they're going to get, we had the head of the Democratic leader of the Kansas legislature come in and tell us the experience when Sam Brownback, governor, and Charles Koch, richest member of Kansas, passed huge tax cuts and made the same exact promises our Republican friends are making today. It was a disaster. They not only put Kansas in a huge deficit, but they cut back on services. Some school districts had to go to 4 days a week, and they lost their elections. And that's the other thing about our Republic. You know, in a certain sense, this is a win-win for us. God forbid they pass this awful bill. They'll pay a huge price. They'll pay a huge price because the public will know about it by a year from now. You know, they can rush it through now. But we're going to fight it tooth and nail, just like health care. We thought maybe if they even pass health care, you know, they'd pay a price because it would hurt so many people. But we know how bad this is for the country, and that's why we're going to fight it. Yes. Okay.
As far as the state and local tax deductions are concerned, how much responsibility do the state legislatures of, say, New York, California, and New Jersey really have? Because these are highly taxed states.
Sure they are. They made a choice. New York has, you know, you go to Long Island, they have great education. They're willing to pay more taxes for education. That should be their choice, and they shouldn't have to pay a double tax because that's their choice. Our Republican friends generally believe in states' rights, but not on the issue of state and local deductibility, it seems. And then you. Yeah.
Question on, earlier today, President Trump met with 7 members of the Republican Senate and talked about immigration and specifically about the DACA issue. And so that he expressed that he does not want the DACA fix to come up in the spending bill in early December. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm going to wait to talk to some of my colleagues, Republican colleagues who were in the room before reacting. I've only heard news reports.
If I can just follow up, Senator Harris and a few others have talked about, you know, not supporting a spending bill if there is no DACA.
I think we're all of the view that we're going to do everything we can to pass the bill, but we expect it will pass because we have a lot of Republican support for this bill. And I think it's going to do better than people think, no matter what Donald Trump says on one given day or another. Yes.
Mr. Schumer, just have a quick toss to you. I know this is about healthcare, or excuse me, taxes. Wanted to ask you about your reaction to the Donna Brazile article in Politico.
Haven't seen it.
Okay. Do you have any?
I haven't seen it. Someone asked me already. I'll read it. What?
Do you believe there's corruption in the DNC?
I don't know. I'm going to read the article before commenting. Last one.
On SALT, is it going to be tougher to get any kind of concessions from Republicans on SALT in the Senate than the House because there's nobody from the states, the high tax?
I think SALT, while many senators dislike it, will have more political, it'll cause, there'll be more House members reluctant to vote for the bill because of SALT than Senate members. It's sort of an interesting dynamic, as I said. In the Senate, you have a lot of deficit hawks. In the House, the hard right, which used to be a deficit hawk whenever there was any spending program, has now seemed to have given that up, although Pete Peterson today said this would be horrible for the deficit. And so it's a different dynamic, but it's a dynamic that makes it harder to pass the bill, because what you have to do to win over the House makes it harder to win over the Senate. Thank you, everybody.